Good to have you with us. Joining us now in Cairo, live, our man in the Middle East, Eddie Yeranian, longtime veteran, CBS Radio Network, and the U.S. Voice of America, and also with the John Fredericks Radio Network. Edward, in Cairo, good to have you, sir.
Thank you, John. Certainly the drumbeats of war are getting a little bit louder. Of course, the Romans had a saying, sivi pacem para bellum, if you want peace, prepare for war. So it's possible at the same time that, this is just posturing. But at the same time, there are a lot of worries, among ordinary people out here in the Middle East that this is going to escalate. I'm not sure it necessarily will, but it's looking like it's going in that direction.
Here's what I can't reconcile, and I know we had you on yesterday, and we're going to do it again because I'm really trying to figure, Monday, I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure this out. The UAE and the Saudis are claiming from anonymous sources that they have intel that says the attacks on the commercial tankers in the Straits was done by Iran or Iranian proxies. What would be the objective of that? Like, if that was true, if Iran did indeed authorize these attacks, what would their objective be? That's what I'm trying to get motive here. How would this help them?
Well, yeah, the analysts on the Saudi-owned news channels and UAE-owned news channels are suggesting that the Iranians are trying to tell their allies that the U.S. is a fickle ally and it's not going to defend them. That's one of the arguments they're using. Also, that the Iranians are trying to strike before the U.S. Aircraft carrier Lincoln arrives in the Gulf. I think it is going to get there in about a day or a day and a half. Of course, those are just arguments. We're listening to a lot of people's talking points, and it's not really clear. And at the same time, there are people in the Iranian government around President Rouhani who have been quoted as saying, if you believe what you read in the news, that they don't control the Iranian government. It's a military clique around Ayatollah Khamenei that's calling the shots, which I think is true. So Rouhani very well and his crew very well might not have been involved in this, and military forces around Ayatollah Khamenei and the international, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, could have been behind this. Which is not to say that they were. But anyway, it does look like tensions are escalating, and of course, as journalists and observers, it's tough to swallow everything whole and let things happen without commenting. And I see a colleague from the Christian Science Monitor, whom I've worked with over the years, trying to defend Iran and make Trump look bad and saying that Bolton is trying to get us into a war, which very well may be true, but I don't know that he knows that for a fact. And maybe he's overdoing it, especially if that's not the case.
Where does the U.S. go from here? I mean, look, I think that, let's just say one thing. The fact that the president is, let me just turn this off. Hang on. Sorry about that. The fact that the president is putting the U.S. in a position to have the option to engage. Not that he's made that decision, but he wants to have that option on the table. I mean, that makes sense, right? I mean, any competent president would do that. And Trump has said, Edward, from day one, when he came down the escalator, I'm not going to telegraph what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you what parameters I have. Everything is on the table, and I'll make the decision I have to make. But he's getting criticism now of potential deployment of assets to put the U.S. in a position if they had to utilize those. I mean, isn't that what a commander-in-chief should do?
Yes, well, you've got half the population and all the media interests that oppose President Trump that are trying to say that he's incompetent and shouldn't be doing anything he's doing, so they'd be criticizing him anyway. But putting that all aside, I think there always is a worry in the lead up to a possible war that things could go wrong. I'm not saying we are heading towards a war, and I'm not saying that President Trump is deliberately trying to lead us into one. And of course, what I would say after covering Iran for, 32 years that I've been out here in the Middle East, I'd say no one has ever tried this. No U.S. president other than Reagan has really ever confronted the Iranians and tried to push them back on the right course and away from their nuclear program. I must say they're still working on their ballistic missile program, and even if they're claiming that they don't have the capabilities to produce a bomb, certainly if you have a ballistic missile that's able to reach Tel Aviv, you could ultimately launch a nuclear weapon at your major enemy, which is Israel. At least they claim Israel is their major enemy. So I think no U.S. recent president in recent memory has tried to confront Iran seriously, and the fact that he's doing it is obviously making his enemies a bit rabid and chomping at the bit.
Let me ask you this. What is the involvement here? How seriously do you take the influence of the Iranian foreign minister said that the pathway to war here is caused by what he called the four Bs. UAE's Mohammed bin Zayed, Saudi's Mohammed bin Salman, who I believe is totally incompetent, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, another B, and then NSA Director, National Security Director John Bolton. How influential are three of these allies in pushing the U.S. to conflict with Iran, which would be in all three of their best interest?
Well, I don't know that they really want a conflict with Iran. I think they want President Trump to get tough with Iran. The UAE stands to lose a lot if there's a real war with Iran. They're very close to the Iranian coast. If you look at the map, how far they are across the Gulf, they're very, very close. It's probably something like across New York Harbor from New Jersey, maybe a little bit more than that. But they do a lot of trade, as you pointed out yesterday, with Iran. Mm-hmm. I think they just want President Trump to get tough with Iran and not to give them any concessions. And getting tough means to get tough on the economy. Now, if getting tough on the economy means they lash out and strike first, this is something I think people are hoping does not happen. Maybe some of them are hoping it happens. I don't know that Mohammed bin Zayed or Mohammed bin Salman actually want this to reach a war. Mm-hmm. Perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu does. I can't say he does. He's been very cautious about actually getting into a war, even in Gaza. I mean, I don't think he really wants to get in a war. He's not the one that provoked that last conflict, or I don't think he's provoked the ones before that either. And Trump has not been provoking a lot of conflicts. He tried to cut a deal with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So I think a lot of this is posturing, but the danger is, of course, something goes wrong and it spins out of control, and it does lead to a war and a serious conflict on the ground.
Well, the move today by the U.S. government evacuating or ordering the evacuation of non-essential personnel out of Iraq and our embassy there in Baghdad, why do you think they did that, or what do you think it means, Edward?
They also pulled called on pulling out Americans and then non-essential personnel from Kurdistan as well. The Iranians and the Iranian-backed militias are the weak point in this equation. They are very strong in Iraq, and they could hit us in places where we're weakest. So I guess that would be the first place to start pulling people out if you're expecting this or worried that this could spiral out of control. And Iran and the Iranian militias have struck, not in a serious way, but they've launched rockets, Grad missiles, at our embassy, I believe, or consulate in Basra back in September, and launched a few errant missiles. I think it was more of a warning, but certainly they're capable of doing it on Baghdad as well. Mm-hmm. So I think we want to get our people out of those danger zones in case this escalates.
Well, look, they're certainly taking all the precautions they need to do, and putting the U.S. in a position to have the option, I think, makes absolute sense. So I guess we go forward from here. And but I tell you what, Edward, I've been covering this stuff with you a long time. I'm just very skeptical of a lot of this stuff because, again, other than disruption, I mean, if you're the Iranians right now and you're being squeezed economically and you've got major problems in your country with unemployment, with devaluation of the dollar, of the Iranian currency, with unemployment rising, with youth unemployment. I mean, why are you going to go pick a meaningless fight with tankers in the UAE's domain? I just fail to see any objective. There's not an economic objective. There's not a military objective. There's not a PR objective. There's no objective. So it's like it's unfathomable to me that the Iranian leadership would sit there and concoct this because I can't find the benefit to them.
Yeah, well, Ayatollah Khamenei, if you listen to him, and I have listened to him for about an hour, about a week ago, he does sound a little bit bellicose, and he has made statements to the effect that Iran is not just going to sit down and allow the U.S. to bring its oil exports to zero without doing something, right. And he didn't specify what that something would be. So he certainly has left the door open to such attacks against his enemies. At the same time, of course, as we said yesterday, we did see a lot of lies in the lead up to the Gulf War with Baghdad, with Saddam Hussein in 2003. And, of course, what I forgot to mention was the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which does look eerily similar. If you look back to 1965, I think that's not at the forefront of people's memories these days. But, yes, a lot of pretexts have been used to get people into wars over the years. The Maine in the war, the Spanish-American War in 1898. I mean, you can look at people at lies and exaggerations and things that were pretexts that were used to get people into countries into wars. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is what that is, even if it might look a bit like that. So I think we're right to point that out, that it does look suspicious, and we should be concerned about what actually happened, but at the same time, we don't really know that Iran was not behind that attack on the 4 ships in Fujairah off the coast of the UAE.
Well, we're running out of time, Edward, but great analysis. I want to thank you for that. As always, you add such an interesting perspective, and it kind of reminds me of the discussion. Remember when the barrel bombs were dropped in Syria, and everybody was saying it was Assad, and that ordered the barrel bombs dropped, and we had a lot of people in the U.S. or some people disputing it, saying it didn't make any sense. I was one of them, but there was a reason. I mean, you could draw a reason. Is that he's Assad wants to send the message. He wants to let everybody know that he's still ruthless, etc. So you could least understand why he might do that, although some people thought that he was not behind it. In this case, I'm just trying to figure out, if they sank one of these, it would be different. I mean, it was nothing happened. Anyway, we'll have to figure this out. Eddie, thanks for being with us. Scott Taylor coming up momentarily. John Fredericks Radio Network. Ed, always appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, John.